Another thing about this, in my mind, the best point guard, the best players make other people better. And we see that with Caitlin Clark. She makes it easier for other players. She makes them better. I don't know that I could say about Chelsea Gray that I'm constantly seeing her make other people better. That's just my thought on it. Not saying she's a scrub.
That's the sound of someone who's watched enough basketball to know what they're seeing doesn't match what they're being told. And on Tuesday, May 5th, when the WNBA GM survey results dropped, that feeling hit Fever fans like a freight train. 42 questions, 42 opportunities for general managers across the league to evaluate talent, coaching, and team dynamics. And when the results came out, one name was conspicuously absent from the top spots where she belonged. We're talking about a player who broke viewership records, who led her team within 5 minutes of a championship, who gets face-guarded 94 feet every single game. So what happened? Did general managers across the league suddenly forget what they watched all season? Or is something else going on here?
I could go through a lot more than 10, but I have chosen 10 of these questions to get into. I'm going to do my best to go through them rather quickly. Here we go. I'll start with the question that says, which player is the best passer? Now, Chelsea Gray received 93% of the votes. Caitlin Clark.
Chelsea Gray, 93% of the vote for best passer in the WNBA. Caitlin Clark, 7%. Let's be clear about something. Chelsea Gray is absolutely a skilled passer. She's won championships, she's got the resume, she knows how to run an offense. But 93-7? When we're talking about a player who averaged over 8 assists per game as a rookie while threading passes that most veterans wouldn't even attempt? Here's what makes this particularly questionable. Caitlin Clark doesn't just make good passes. She makes passes that change how defenses have to prepare. She hits cutters in transition at full speed with no-look bullets. She finds shooters through triple teams. She creates angles that shouldn't exist. And we know this because of how teams defend her. You don't face guard someone 94 feet if their passing isn't a legitimate threat. You don't change your entire defensive scheme if their court vision is just average.
Here. Which team will be the most fun to watch? Dallas at 36%, and then Atlanta and Indiana tied at 29%, then Golden State at 7%. What? How in the world is Dallas considered the most fun to watch?
Now look at this question. Which team will be the most fun to watch? Dallas wins with 36%. Atlanta and Indiana tie at 29%. Dallas. The team built around efficient, methodical basketball. And don't get me wrong, Paige Bueckers is a good player. She shoots efficiently, she makes smart decisions. But fun to watch? Over the team with Caitlin Clark launching from the logo, Kelsey Mitchell moving like lightning, and the most dynamic transition game in the league? This is where you start to see a pattern. Because this isn't about basketball evaluation anymore. This is about something else entirely. When you ask people what's fun to watch, and they don't put the player who brought 3.2 million viewers to WNBA games at the top of that list, you're not answering based on what you've actually seen on the court.
Kelsey Mitchell, who's as quick as lightning? Anyway, a slight. Moving on to number 3. Which head coach is the best manager / motivator of people? Becky Hammon at 43%. Then you have a 3-way tie with Nate Tibbetts from Phoenix, Stephanie White from Indiana, Natalie Nakase from Golden State, all with 14%. Also had votes for Cheryl Reeve and Carl Smesko. Nah, Stephanie White, hands down, in my opinion, was the best manager and motivator of
people. Becky Hammon takes this one with 43%. Stephanie White tied at 14% with 2 other coaches. Think about what Stephanie White walked into last season. A team that had been completely demoralized, a roster dealing with constant injuries throughout the year, earning them the nickname Hospital Team. Players going down left and right, rotations changing every week, and somehow she kept that group together, kept them fighting, kept them believing. And it worked. They made it to within 5 minutes of a championship. 5 minutes. With a patchwork roster held together by sheer will and coaching excellence. But here's what really exposes the flaw in this voting. We know for a fact that it wasn't Becky Hammon who turned the Aces season around in 2025. It was Aja Wilson. Wilson herself got on a call with her teammates and basically said, if you're not ready to show up, don't show up at all. That's when they went on their run. That's when everything changed. So the coach getting credit for managing and motivating a team of Olympians who needed their star player to light a fire under them gets 43%. Meanwhile, the coach who actually kept a depleted roster competitive and motivated through an injury-plagued season gets 14%.
Gabby Williams, 60%, Golden State. Brittany Sykes, Toronto, 20%, and Dejanay Carrington was mentioned, Jordan Canada, and Kalia Copper. Now, I don't have a whole lot to say about this. I just want to say, keep your eyes open for Raven Johnson. Yes, the rookie, because her defense, not just on the perimeter, like she can guard probably 1 through 4, maybe even 5. So we definitely want to keep our eyes on her on the perimeter. Don't sleep.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Which player forces opposing coaches to make the most adjustments? Aja Wilson wins with 60%. Caitlin Clark gets mentioned but doesn't crack the top 3 percentages. Let's think about this logically. What does it mean to force adjustments? It means a coach has to change their game plan specifically because of what you do on the court. It means they have to dedicate resources, change schemes, do things they wouldn't normally do. Now ask yourself, who gets defended like nobody else in the league? Who faces constant double teams starting at half court? Who gets grabbed, held, and face guarded for 94 feet? Who causes teams to completely abandon their normal defensive principles? Remember when Ari McDonald was with the Sparks and literally forgot she had another free throw because the entire game plan was to get in Caitlin's face immediately? That actually happened. A professional player forgot the rules of basketball because she was so focused on the defensive scheme designed specifically for one player. That's forcing adjustments. That's making coaches lose sleep trying to figure out how to contain someone. And it's not Aja Wilson causing that level of strategic panic, as good as she is.
Because there are more things that they're going to be doing that's going to make it less predictable to be able to guard Caitlin and to be able to guard Aaliyah and to be able to guard the Indiana Fever. And so more adjustments are coming. It's really not Aja Wilson. I know she's a good player with the hip checks and the moving screens. I understand that. And I'm not trying to sound like a quote unquote hater, but I'm just saying Aja Wilson with the screens, y'all know it's true. But yeah, she's Aja Wilson. But Caitlin Clark demands the most adjustments in an entire game plan and the way a game is played, particularly on the defensive.
Best point guard in the WNBA. Chelsea Gray again, 73%. Caitlin Clark at 20%. Paige Bueckers gets 7%. This is the one that really crystallizes everything wrong with this survey, because it contradicts itself in the most obvious way possible. If Chelsea Gray is the best point guard in the league, why isn't she defended like it? Why doesn't she show up in the forces adjustments category? Why aren't teams game planning around stopping her the way they game plan around stopping Caitlin? You can't have it both ways. You can't say someone is the best at their position, but then admit through your other answers that she doesn't command the same level of defensive attention, doesn't force the same adjustments, doesn't impact games in the same way. And let's talk about the numbers from 2024, because this isn't subjective. When Caitlin was left off the Olympic team, people actually crunched the statistics. And guess what? Caitlin was outperforming Chelsea Gray across multiple categories. Not by a little, by a lot.
That the best point guard in the WNBA is Chelsea Gray, but nobody is guarding her 94 feet and nobody is making adjustments for her. But Caitlin Clark gets face guarded 94 feet. People change the way they play defense for Caitlin Clark. And not only that, I remember in 2024 when Caitlin was left off the Olympic team and people crunched the numbers. It didn't take a whole lot of crunching. Caitlin Clark was outplaying Chelsea Gray.
But here's the one that broke the internet. If you were starting a franchise today and could sign any player in the WNBA, who would it be? Paige Bueckers, 33%. Caitlin Clark tied with Aja Wilson at 20% each. Paige Bueckers, a player who's played exactly 0 games so far this season. A player who, while talented, hasn't proven she can carry a franchise, hasn't shown she can elevate teammates consistently, hasn't demonstrated the kind of impact that changes an entire organization. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark took Iowa, a team without a roster full of 5-star recruits, to back-to-back championship games. She became the all-time leading scorer in NCAA history. She broke viewership records everywhere she played. She made her teammates better in ways that were obvious to anyone watching. And as a rookie in the WNBA, she did exactly what she did in college, made everyone around her better, created opportunities, drew defensive attention that opened up the entire floor, brought fans, brought money, brought attention to a league that desperately needed all three.
Breonna Stewart and Nafisa Collier also received some votes. Paige Bueckers, 33%. General managers say they would start a franchise with Paige Bueckers. Now, I'm going to come out of this screen share because I need to have a little bit of conversation about this, because I think there's more here than meets the eye. Paige Bueckers.
So what's really happening here? Because this isn't about basketball evaluation. General managers didn't suddenly forget how to assess talent. They didn't collectively decide that statistical production, defensive attention, and proven impact don't matter anymore. Here's what this survey actually reveals. It reveals that the baggage that comes with Caitlin Clark, the noise, the controversy, the constant media circus, the toxic elements of the fan base, all of that factors into how people in the league view her value to a franchise. Think about it from a GM's perspective. Yes, Caitlin brings incredible talent. Yes, she brings fans and revenue and attention. But she also brings death threats to referees. She brings conspiracy theories about every call. She brings a subset of fans who will attack your coach, your front office, your other players if they perceive any slight against their favorite player. She brings reporters who get harassed for doing their jobs. She brings social media mobs that descend on anyone who criticizes her. She brings an environment where you can't just focus on basketball because everything becomes a referendum on whether you're properly appreciating her greatness. And look, that's not Caitlin's fault. She's not responsible for how other people behave. She's not out there encouraging toxicity. But the reality is, it comes with her. And if you're a general manager trying to build a franchise, you have to consider whether dealing with all of that is worth it, even for someone with her talent level. That's why Paige Bueckers wins that question. Not because she's better at basketball, but because she brings talent without the circus. She brings skill without the constant controversy. She brings star power without the baggage. Is that fair to Caitlin? Absolutely not. Should she be penalized for things she can't control? No. But we're not talking about what should be. We're talking about what is. And what is, apparently, is that general managers across the league would rather build around someone else. Now there's another factor here that can't be ignored. Recency bias. Caitlin didn't really play in 2025 because of the unrivaled league schedule. So while other players were fresh in people's minds, Caitlin's rookie season was already fading from memory. People forget quickly in sports. They forget record-breaking performances. They forget historic seasons. They forget what someone did 6 months ago if they haven't seen them recently. That's part of why these results look the way they do. Chelsea Gray has been consistently visible. Aja Wilson just came off another dominant season. Paige Bueckers is the shiny new thing everyone's excited about. Caitlin, she's yesterday's news until she reminds everyone who she is, and she will. Because here's what general managers are going to remember real quick once the season starts. They're going to remember why their coaches spent hours game planning for her. They're going to remember why their defenses had to do things they'd never done before. They're going to remember why their arenas were packed when Indiana came to town. They're going to remember that Caitlin Clark isn't just a good player. She's a generational talent who changes how the game is played. And all the survey results in the world don't change that reality. But for Indiana fans, this survey stings because it feels like disrespect. And honestly, it is disrespect. Not necessarily intentional, not necessarily malicious, but disrespect nonetheless. When you watch someone dominate at the level Caitlin dominated, and then see her get 7% of the vote for best passer, it feels personal. When you watch Stephanie White hold together a team that had every reason to quit and see her tied for third in coaching recognition, it feels like nobody's paying attention. When you watch Aaliyah Boston give Aja Wilson fits every time they match up and see her barely mentioned in defensive categories, it feels like people are watching a different sport. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Maybe this survey reveals less about the players and more about the people voting. Maybe it reveals biases we don't want to acknowledge. Maybe it reveals that even professional evaluators can't separate what happens on the court from what happens around it. So here's the question for you. Do you think this survey accurately reflects player value? Or do you think general managers let outside factors cloud their basketball judgment? Because you can't tell me with a straight face that the best passer in the league gets 7% face guarded and the best point guard doesn't force any defensive adjustments. Pick a side, drop your take in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns of the stories the league doesn't want you focusing on, subscribe because we're just getting started. The season hasn't even begun, and already the narratives are being written. Let's make sure they're written with facts, not feelings.